Some stories make no sense unless you've ever been desperate. And if you're here just to judge, pause, sit with me. Because the line between sacrifice and shame is thinner than you think. A 22-year-old man marrying a 70-year-old woman. That sounds like a punchline. Until you realize what he was trying to save. And if you've ever stood at a crossroads with no good choice, drop a comment. Not to confess, but to remind someone else that survival isn't always pretty. Now listen, closely, because what happened behind that locked door broke more than just silence. Zayn Malik lived in Dearborn, Michigan, a city that felt colder than its winters. His father had passed when he was just 15. Since then, life had been an avalanche. His mother, once radiant, now wilted beneath a terminal diagnosis. His younger sister, Amal, was on the verge of quitting school to pick up night shifts. Zayn worked 3 jobs, dishwasher, night clerk, gas station, but even that barely covered rent, let alone medications. Every morning he walked out of their tiny apartment, hoping today wouldn't break him. Then one wet afternoon in a dim Pakistani tea shop, he met her, Safia al-Rahman. She walked like time belonged to her. A black abaya framed her posture, but her diamond-pinned hijab caught every flicker of candlelight. She looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You're Zayn Malik?" Zayn blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, ma'am. Do I know you?" "You will," she said. "Marry me." He laughed. She didn't. She leaned in, her voice soft but unshakable. "I'll clear your debts, pay for your mother's treatment, your sister's education. You'll have a room of your own, no expectations, no intimacy, just presence. My name beside yours." Zayn tried to find the trick, but Safia already knew his secrets. She recited his unpaid bills like reading a grocery list, even mentioned the expired inhaler his mom had hidden. It wasn't love, it was leverage, and it worked. Not in a grand cinematic way, but in quiet, irreversible steps. That night, Zayn sat on the floor outside his mother's room, listening to her labored breathing. He could hear Amal softly crying in the bathroom, trying to be strong for them both. The guilt clawed at his chest like a slow, dull knife. He wasn't saving anyone by holding on to pride. He went to sleep with the proposal echoing in his mind like a haunting prayer. In his dreams, he saw his mother smiling again, his sister wearing a white coat, a home without fear. When he woke up, he didn't feel brave, he felt empty, but sometimes emptiness makes space for difficult decisions. That night, Zayn watched his mother sleep in pain and heard his sister praying softly behind a door. The next morning, he didn't feel brave, he felt numb. 7 days later, he signed a contract beside a gold-trimmed Quran. No wedding photos, no guests, just ink on paper and a mansion that smelled like forgotten air. The mansion sat on the edge of silence, not haunted, but waiting. Every night, Zayn ate with Safia. She was polite, graceful, but not once did she call him husband. Servants floated like ghosts, every hallway polished, every meal precise. Yet Zayn felt like he'd stepped into a museum, not a home. And always, there was the locked door, 2nd floor. Left corridor, brass handle that never turned. Each time he passed, a servant would appear out of nowhere. "Private wing, sir," Zayn asked once at dinner. Safia looked at him, then down at her plate. Some doors should stay closed. It wasn't fear in her voice. It was memory. Then came Mira. 19, small frame, soft-spoken. She was the only servant who didn't flinch when Zayn said, "Thank you." One evening, Zayn saw her in the courtyard reading. He asked, "That locked door, what's behind it?" Mira's lips tightened. "Don't go near it. Some rooms carry grief like perfume." 2 nights later, she knocked on his door, trembling. "Madam Safia would like to see you, now, alone." The drawing room was drenched in golden lamplight. Safia sat on a velvet settee, sipping cardamom tea like a queen, but her eyes looked decades younger, or sadder. "You want answers?" she said. Zayn nodded. She handed him a photograph. His father, Samuel Malik, standing beside a young Safia, both laughing in a sunlit garden. Zayn's jaw clenched. I loved your father, she said. After my husband died, he was kind to me, made me feel alive again. But when I asked for more, he said I was just a rich widow with no future. She paused. I married you to punish him, to remind him that the life he dismissed still held power. Zane's hands shook. So I was a tool? At first, she whispered, but you were gentle, honest. You made this tomb breathe again. She slid a brass key across the table. Go to that room, tomorrow night, alone. No questions, just your heart. Zane opened the door with hesitant hands. The air was still, sweet, like rose water and aged paper. A hush fell over him, the kind that lives in spaces made sacred by grief. Inside, shelves of dusty journals, faded photographs, silk scarves, old perfume bottles. Everything in the room was frozen in time, as though it had been untouched for decades, yet curated with the reverence of someone who still visited in memory. A single diary lay open on the desk. The writing was elegant, shaky, like someone trying to stay composed while bleeding inside. Dear Samuel, I waited again at the station. You said you'd come. I sold everything for you. Why do I keep believing in your ghost? Zane read it, aloud, barely above a whisper. The sound of his voice in that room felt wrong, too alive. He moved slowly, picking up fragments of a past he never knew existed, poems scribbled in the margins of ledger books, Polaroids of sunlit days, theater stubs, and even a crumpled napkin with a lipstick kiss. One corner of the room had a wall of framed photographs, Safia and Samuel smiling, leaning into each other, with eyes that still believed in miracles. The longer he stayed, the more he realized this was not just a room. It was a confession. A museum of heartbreak and unspoken prayers. Behind him, a soft voice. He never replied. Safia stood at the doorway. Her eyes weren't angry, just tired. I built this room because I needed somewhere to grieve where no one could see me, she said. The world knew me as strong, wealthy, proud, but this room, this was where I kept the parts of me that cracked quietly. Zane didn't speak. His throat tightened with something like sorrow, but heavier. The sorrow you feel for someone you finally see clearly. She walked forward, slower than usual, and placed a velvet folder in his hands. My will, she said. Everything is yours now. The house, my foundation, the education fund, even the locked room, though it's no longer locked, is it? Why? Because I trust you, because you didn't look away, because you stayed, and because you saw me, past the age, the bitterness, the scar. Zane met her gaze. For the first time she looked not like a woman hardened by life, but one who had finally unburdened herself. They stood in silence, not awkward, but sacred. Weeks. Later she collapsed in the hallway. Heart failure. At the hospital he never left her side. He held her hand even when it trembled in fear. He read her favorite surahs aloud. Mira brought flowers, and Amal visited with their mother, who was finally strong enough to walk again. On her last night, Safia looked at him with tear-glazed eyes. You made me feel young again, even if just once. Then she was gone, but not erased. Zane stayed in the room long after, whispering prayers not just for her soul, but for the part of her that had loved in silence for so long. Zane didn't throw anything away. He restored the house, painted the walls, replaced chandeliers with warm bulbs, donated the fine china to shelters, turned the dining hall into a free tutoring center. He paid every penny of his sister's tuition. His mother now smiled without pain, and Mira, she stayed, not as a maid, but as a presence, a quiet kind of constant. You were never afraid of Safia, he said one day. She gave me safety, Mira answered, but you gave this place peace. Zane saw her then, not as someone who cleaned his room, but someone who healed his silence. I know this sounds sudden, he said one evening, but would it make you happy if I asked you to stay in my life, not as staff, as something more? Mira blinked surprised, but her smile answered first. Yes, they married under the courtyard tree, no music, no diamonds, just vows and the wind listening. Months passed. Mira was pregnant. Zane built a small reading room from the storage attic. But the locked room, He transformed it too. Books lined the walls, plants bathed in light, and on the arch he carved love. Doesn't always come when we want it, but when it does, it makes everything before it worth surviving. Sometimes the decisions we regret most are the ones that lead us exactly where we're supposed to be. Zayn never chose love. Not at first. But love chose him, quietly, patiently, and with grace. If this story touched something in you, don't leave silently. Share your thoughts below, because your words might be the key to someone else's locked door. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay kind, stay curious, and stay human.